Hi, my friends, tonight we're stepping back in time, way back to the bustling streets, sprawling villas, and massive estates of ancient Rome. But instead of lounging with senators or toasting wine with wealthy patricians, we're going to experience what it was like to live as a Roman slave. Imagine waking up every day knowing you were someone else's property. The good days meant a little less work, maybe a bit of bread or a kind word. The bad days, well, let's just say you'd have to tread carefully. Slavery was the backbone of Roman society, the unseen gears keeping the mighty empire churning. From building aqueducts to cleaning sandals, slaves were everywhere, their lives woven into every thread of Roman daily life. But don't romanticize it, this isn't some charming historical reenactment. It was brutal, dehumanizing, and filled with uncertainty. Before you fully sink into your pillow, a quick like and subscribe would mean the world if you're into sleepy stories like this. Got a strange bit of history you want to hear before bed? Drop it in the comments. Wherever you are, I hope tonight brings you rest, comfort, and maybe a curious dream or two. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes open in the dim light of dawn, the air heavy with the scent of damp stone and straw. Around you others stir silent figures wrapped in rough woolen blankets, rubbing their eyes and stretching stiff limbs. The clinking of chains echoes faintly from somewhere nearby. Welcome to the life of a Roman slave. Slavery in ancient Rome wasn't just an unfortunate side effect of empire, it was essential. The Roman economy, its culture, and even its leisure depended on the labor of enslaved people. Historians estimate that at the height of the empire, slaves made up as much as 30% of the population in some areas. But not all slaves lived the same life. You could find yourself scrubbing floors in a villa, breaking your back on a farm, or enduring the roar of the Colosseum as a gladiator. Some slaves were educated and skilled, working as teachers or doctors. Others were little more than beasts of burden, hauling heavy loads and enduring brutal treatment. Slavery wasn't limited to one ethnicity or origin. You could have been a Gaul, captured in war, a Greek scholar, sold into servitude, or a child born into slavery in a Roman household. This diversity meant that slaves brought a kaleidoscope of languages, traditions, and knowledge into the empire. Imagine being dragged from a battlefield, your village burning behind you. Or being born into a life where the idea of freedom was as distant as the stars. You're shuffled into a line with others, some crying, some silent in shock as you march toward your new reality. One quirk of Roman slavery was its paradoxical visibility and invisibility. Slaves were everywhere, but they weren't acknowledged as individuals. They were tools, status symbols, or even talking property. Historians still argue whether this dehumanization was a calculated social structure or simply the result of Rome's expansionist machine. Despite this, slaves left an undeniable mark on Roman society. Many of the intricate mosaics that decorate Roman ruins today were created by enslaved artisans. The knowledge of Greek literature, medicine, and philosophy flowed into Roman culture largely because of educated Greek slaves. But let's not sugarcoat it, being a Roman slave wasn't about intellectual contributions or artistic triumphs. It was about survival. You trudge behind a cart, the sun beating down on your back, your wrists chafe against the manacles, the metal warm from the heat. The man beside you stumbles, earning a barked order and a shove from the guard. At night, when the day's labor is done, you might huddle with others around a small fire, sharing scraps of bread or fish. Someone hums a tune, a melody from a homeland they barely remember. These stolen moments of camaraderie are fleeting but precious. Interestingly, Roman society had a peculiar way of humanizing slaves, just enough to exploit them more effectively. They were often given tasks that required trust, like managing household accounts or educating children. But don't mistake this for kindness, it was purely practical. If you were a slave in a wealthy household, your knowledge and skills were assets, and keeping you alive and functional benefited your owner. Yet for all the hardship, there were glimmers of hope, however faint. Manumission, the act of granting freedom to a slave, was not uncommon in Rome. Freed slaves or freedmen could even rise to positions of influence, but the path to freedom was anything but guaranteed, and most slaves lived and died in servitude. As the stars emerge above Rome, the city quiets. You sit on a cold stone floor, your head resting on your knees. Around you, others whisper in hushed tones stories of their lives before captivity, tales of rebellion, and the faintest dreams of freedom. And so you close your eyes, not knowing what tomorrow will bring. You wake up before the sun, your body aching from the previous day's labor. The straw beneath you offers little comfort, and the chill of the morning air seeps through the thin tunic you wear. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows a call that signals the beginning of yet another day in servitude. Slaves in ancient Rome didn't have the luxury of sleeping in. For most, the day began at the crack of dawn, and the tasks ahead varied depending on where they were stationed. If you were unfortunate enough to be assigned to a rural estate or latifundium, your day was already mapped out, planting, harvesting, and tending to crops and livestock. These sprawling agricultural enterprises fed the empire, and they demanded back-breaking labor. Roman agriculture relied heavily on enslaved laborers. Grain olives and grapes were the staples of Roman cuisine and economy, and their production was fueled by the sweat and toil of countless slaves. The latifundia were notorious for their harsh conditions. Overseers, often themselves former slaves, kept a close watch, ensuring that every task was completed with brutal efficiency. As you push a plow through rocky soil, the wooden handle digging into your palms, you catch a glimpse of the estate's owner. He stands on a hill surveying the fields, a cup of wine in hand. For him, this land is wealth, status, and power. For you, it's a prison. Life on a farm wasn't the only grueling existence a Roman slave could endure. In the mines, conditions were even worse. Gold, silver, and other valuable resources were extracted from deep within the earth, and slaves were the ones sent into the dangerous tunnels. The air was thick with dust, the temperature stifling, and collapses were all too common. Few who were sent to the mines ever returned. It's a cruel irony. You think that the very materials that decorate Rome's temples and palaces come from the suffering of those who will never step foot in such places. But not all slaves were relegated to the countryside or the mines. In the bustling city of Rome, a different kind of life awaited. Urban slaves might find themselves working in household shops or even the public baths. On the surface, this might seem preferable to rural labor, but it came with its own set of challenges. Imagine being a household slave responsible for every whim and demand of your master's family. From preparing elaborate meals to scrubbing the marble floors, your every movement is scrutinized. The penalty for mistakes, harsh and swift. And yet, there's a peculiar intimacy in these roles. You're close enough to witness the inner workings of Roman life, the gossip, the rivalries, the decadence. Take a moment to picture the grandeur of a Roman villa. The atrium with its open roof and central pool reflects sunlight onto the mosaic-tiled floors. Statues of gods and ancestors stand guard their marble faces, indifferent to the life unfolding around them. For a slave, this world is both familiar and foreign. You belong here, and yet you don't. Some household slaves were even entrusted with the care of their master's children, a role that required patience and skill. These slaves, often educated, could teach Latin, Greek, or arithmetic. But don't let this proximity to privilege fool you. It didn't erase their status. At the end of the day, they were still property, their lives dictated by the whims of their owners. One peculiar aspect of Roman slavery was the peculium, a small allowance or savings that some slaves were permitted to accumulate. With enough peculium, a slave could potentially buy their freedom. It was a glimmer of hope, albeit one that required years of loyalty and luck. Historians still argue whether this practice was a genuine path to liberation or simply a way for masters to extract more labor by dangling the promise of freedom. As the day wears on, you pause for a meager meal. Bread porridge, perhaps a few olives if you're lucky. The food is simple and unchanging, but it keeps you moving. You think of the feasts you've witnessed, the roasted meats, the exotic fruits, the overflowing goblets of wine, and feel the gnawing pang of envy. Yet even among slaves, hierarchy existed. Skilled artisans, scribes, and tutors often fared better than field workers or laborers. Their talents made them valuable, and their masters were more likely to treat them as investments rather than disposable tools. But this didn't mean their lives were easy. A single misstep, a poorly crafted vase, a misspelled word, could result in punishment, or even being sold to a harsher master. As the sun begins to set, you finish your tasks and return to your quarters. The air is thick with the scent of sweat and exhaustion, but there's a faint sense of camaraderie among your fellow slaves. Stories are shared in hushed tones, laughter bubbles up despite the circumstances, and for a brief moment you feel a connection to those around you. You lie down staring at the wooden beams above you. Your body aches, your hands are calloused, but your mind drifts to thoughts of freedom. Is it possible? Could you ever escape this life? Or is it better to simply endure to survive one day at a time? And so, as the stars twinkle above the city, you close your eyes, ready to face whatever the next day may bring. The next morning you awaken to the clang of metal tools and the low hum of voices preparing for another day of toil. Today your duties take you to the bustling streets of Rome, where urban slavery unfolds in stark contrast to the rural life of the latifundia. You shuffle along the cobblestone streets carrying a bundle of laundry for your master's household. The city is alive with activity merchants hawking their goods, children chasing each other through the alleys, and the unmistakable aroma of freshly baked bread wafting from a nearby taberna. As an urban slave, your tasks might range from household errands to assisting craftsmen in their workshops. You pass a blacksmith's forge, its heat radiating onto the street, and watch as an enslaved assistant hammers away at a glowing piece of iron under the watchful eye of the master. Skilled slaves like these were highly prized, and their expertise often afforded them a slightly better standard of living, if only by comparison. But even in the city, life as a slave was far from predictable. Imagine being summoned to the Forum to assist with your master's business dealings. The Forum, a sprawling hub of commerce and politics, thrums with energy. Senators in flowing togas discuss the affairs of the empire, while traders haggle over goods from distant lands. Your role here might be that of a scribe recording transactions in precise Latin, or perhaps you're tasked with managing the accounts of a shop. In some cases, urban slaves were even given the responsibility of overseeing other slaves, acting as a sort of middle management. While this position offered a modicum of authority, it also placed you squarely in the line of blame should anything go wrong. As you navigate the city, you can't help but notice the stark divide between the lives of the free citizens and those of the enslaved. The baths, for instance, are a place of relaxation for Rome's elite, a space to socialize, exercise, and unwind. But for slaves, they represent yet another realm of labor. You recall your own experiences tending to the baths, scrubbing the tiled floors until they gleamed, fetching water to keep the pools filled, and ensuring the fires beneath the hypocaust system burned steadily to provide heat. The baths were a marvel of engineering, but their upkeep was grueling work made all the more challenging by the constant demands of the patrons. Despite these hardships, some slaves found opportunities to carve out small moments of agency within the chaos of urban life. Take, for example, the story of Tiro Cicero's trusted secretary. A slave with exceptional intellect and organizational skills, Tiro was instrumental in managing Cicero's correspondence and political affairs. He even developed a system of shorthand writing that became widely influential. Though still a slave, Tiro's contributions earned him respect and eventually his freedom. Historians still debate whether such cases of manumission were common or exceptional. For every Tiro who rose to prominence, countless others toiled in obscurity, their names and stories lost to history. You continue your journey passing by a ludus or gladiator school. The sound of clashing swords and shouted commands drifts through the air, and you shudder at the thought of those enslaved to this brutal life. Gladiators, though often celebrated as heroes by the Roman public, lived under constant threat of injury and death. While some fought voluntarily, many were slaves forced into the arena to entertain the masses. The Colosseum looms in the distance, a testament to Rome's love of spectacle. You've heard stories of the elaborate games held there, battles between gladiators, reenactments of famous wars, and even staged hunts with wild animals imported from across the empire. For the audience, these events were thrilling. For the slaves who participated, they were a matter of survival. Yet, amidst the cruelty of urban slavery, there were glimmers of humanity. Some masters allowed their slaves to marry and form families, though these unions were not legally recognized. You think of your own family torn apart when you were sold into servitude. It's a bitter memory, but one that fuels your determination to endure. As the day progresses, you find yourself at the market where the sights and sounds are almost overwhelming. Stalls overflow with goods, fragrant spices from the east, vibrant textiles dyed with costly purple, and fresh produce that seems almost too perfect to be real. But as a slave, you're here not to shop, but to carry out your master's orders. You watch as another slave, a young woman, negotiates the purchase of fish. Her confidence is striking, and you wonder how she's managed to maintain such poise in a life that often strips people of their dignity. Perhaps she's been lucky enough to serve a lenient master, or perhaps it's simply her way of coping. There's a quiet solidarity among slaves in the city, a shared understanding of the hardships they face. Though you may come from different backgrounds, speak different languages, or serve different masters, there's a bond that transcends these divides. A brief exchange of glances, a whispered word of encouragement, or shared meal can provide a sense of connection in an otherwise isolating existence. As the sun begins to set, the city takes on a different rhythm. The streets grow quieter, the markets close, and the glow of oil lamps flickers in the windows. You return to your master's house, your body weary, but your mind alive with thoughts of the day. You think of the brief moments of beauty you witnessed, the golden light on the Tiber River, the laughter of children playing in the square, the intricate patterns of a mosaic floor. Even in a life of servitude, there are fleeting instances of wonder, reminders that the world is larger than the confines of your circumstances. And so, as you prepare for another night of rest, you hold on to these moments, small though they may be. They are a testament to your resilience, a quiet defiance against the hardships you endure. As the cool evening air settles over the city, you begin to reflect on the unique social dynamics of slavery in Rome. While the cruelty and hardship are ever present, the boundaries between master and servant are often blurred in unexpected ways. Your master, though undeniably your superior, sometimes treats you less like a possession and more like an essential part of the household. This is particularly evident during convivium, the Roman dinner party. These gatherings are a microcosm of Roman society where status is displayed not only through lavish food and drink, but also through the efficiency and grace of the slaves who serve it. Tonight, a small convivium takes place in the triclinium, the dining room adorned with vibrant frescoes and a mosaic floor that feels cool beneath your bare feet. Reclining on couches arranged in a U shape, the guests are draped in fine linens, their fingers adorned with rings that glint in the candlelight. Your role is clear: serve the food, pour the wine, and anticipate their every need. The banquet begins with the gustatio or appetizers, which include olives, honey-dipped dates, and fresh bread. You move carefully, balancing trays with practiced ease. A mistake here could mean more than embarrassment, it could bring punishment, as even minor disruptions to the evening are seen as failures on your part. As the scene of the main course is served, the atmosphere grows more animated. The guests discuss politics, recount victories in trade, and debate the latest Roman poetry. You notice how they rarely acknowledge you or the other slaves directly, as if your presence is both integral and invisible. One guest gestures for more wine, and you oblige, filling his goblet with a deep red vintage from Hispania. As you pour, you overhear snippets of their conversation about the upcoming games in the Colosseum. It's a reminder of the stark contrast between their leisure and the brutality faced by the slaves who will fight in those games. Dessert. The secunda mensa arrives a spread of ripe fruits, honey cakes, and spiced wine. The scents are intoxicating, but you know better than to let your hunger show. For slaves, the leftovers from such feasts are often the only chance to taste these delicacies, but only after the guests have left and the tables have been cleared. Historians still argue whether these banquets served as opportunities for slaves to gain favor with their masters, or if they were merely another stage for the demonstration of power. Some slaves, like the skilled cooks or entertainers, might receive praise or even gifts for their contributions to the evening's success. Others, particularly those in more menial roles, remain unnoticed and unrewarded. After the convivium ends, you and the other slaves begin the arduous task of cleaning up. The fine dishes are carefully washed, the floor swept, and the furniture rearranged. By the time you're finished, the house is silent save for the faint crackle of the hearth. Though exhausted, you find a moment to yourself in the quiet kitchen. The remnants of the feast, a crust of bread, a slice of fruit, become a small but cherished meal. It's a fleeting reminder of the life you might have led under different circumstances where food wasn't a privilege but a right. As you lie down to sleep, the events of the evening replay in your mind. You think of the subtle power dynamics at play, the way a single raised eyebrow from your master can dictate your every move, and yet how your efficiency and poise hold the household together. It's a precarious balance, one that requires constant vigilance and adaptability. Your thoughts drift to the stories you've heard of slaves who managed to rise above their station. There's the tale of Eunice, a slave who led a rebellion in Sicily, claiming divine visions as his inspiration. Or the legend of Spartacus, whose name alone strikes fear and fascination in equal measure. These figures, though ultimately defeated, serve as symbols of resistance, their legacies a testament to the human spirit's refusal to be broken. But rebellion is a distant dream, one fraught with risk and uncertainty. For now, your survival depends on navigating the intricate web of Roman society, where loyalty is rewarded but always with strings attached. The next morning, as dawn breaks over the city, you're reminded that life as a slave in Rome is a constant negotiation of boundaries and expectations. You may be a tool in the eyes of your master, but within the confines of your role, there are moments of agency, small, fleeting acts that remind you of your humanity. As you prepare for the day ahead, you find solace in the routines that anchor your life. The act of lighting the household lamps, arranging the atrium, and tending to the garden becomes a meditative practice, a way to assert control in a world that offers so little. And so another day begins, filled with the same challenges and uncertainties, yet marked by the quiet strength that keeps you moving forward. The days roll by with an unyielding rhythm, each one blending into the next like tiles in a mosaic. You rise before the sun, greeted by the faint glow of the city stirring to life. The duties of a Roman slave are many, and today your tasks take you beyond the confines of the domus and into the bustling streets of the city itself. Your destination is the Forum, the vibrant heart of Roman civic and economic life. Your master has entrusted you with errands purchasing fresh produce, procuring a scroll from a scribe, and delivering a message to a colleague. These tasks may seem mundane, but they offer a rare glimpse of the world beyond the household. The Forum is alive with activity, its stone-paved square crowded with merchants, artisans, and citizens engaged in fervent conversation. The scent of fresh bread from the nearby bakery mingles with the sharp tang of fish laid out on wooden stalls. You weave through the crowd, careful not to draw too much attention to yourself. As a slave, your presence here is tolerated, but your status ensures that you remain invisible to most. Your first stop is the produce market, where vendors shout over one another to hawk their goods. The stall you're looking for belongs to a freedman who supplies your master's household with fruits and vegetables. Freedmen, once slaves themselves, occupy an ambiguous place in Roman society. Though no longer bound by servitude, they often remain tied to their former masters through patronage, their newfound freedom tempered by lingering obligations. As you negotiate for a basket of figs and a bundle of leeks, you overhear a conversation between two merchants about the latest edict from the emperor. The topic shifts to the city's ongoing construction projects, and you catch a fleeting mention of slaves working in the quarries and on massive public works like aqueducts and temples. These laborers, you think, endure a life far harsher than your own. Their contributions monumental but largely unacknowledged. Historians still debate whether urban slaves like you fared better than their rural counterparts. While city life offers moments of interaction and respite, it also brings constant scrutiny and the pressure to perform. In contrast, agricultural slaves endure physical toil under the harsh sun. Their isolation both a curse and a shield. Your next task takes you to the scribe's shop, a small, dimly lit room, where the air is thick with the smell of ink and parchment. The scribe, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers, barely glances at you as he hands over the scroll. You're reminded of your own inability to read or write, a deliberate limitation imposed to maintain control. Education for slaves is a contentious issue. While some masters see value in cultivating skilled workers, others fear the empowerment that knowledge might bring. Scroll in hand, you make your way to the final stop, delivering a message to your master's associate. The man's villa is a short walk from the Forum, and as you approach, you can't help but admire its grandeur. The marble columns, intricate mosaics, and sprawling garden are a testament to his wealth and status. You're greeted by another slave who takes the message and offers a brief nod of acknowledgement before retreating inside. On your way back to the Forum, you pass by a small group of children playing knucklebones in the shadow of a temple. Their laughter is infectious, and for a moment, you're transported to a simpler time, your own childhood, before servitude became your reality. It's a fleeting memory, one you quickly push aside as the weight of the present reasserts itself. As you return to the domus, the streets grow quieter, the morning rush giving way to the midday lull. You slip through the back entrance and deposit the goods in the kitchen, where the cook gives you a curt nod of approval. Your errands are complete, but the day is far from over. In the afternoon, you're tasked with tending to the household's atrium, the central courtyard, that serves as both a gathering space and a status symbol. The atrium is meticulously maintained, its impluvium reflecting the sky above like a polished mirror. As you arrange the space, you're struck by the contrast between its beauty and the labor required to sustain it, a silent reminder of the invisible hands that keep the Roman world turning. The day ends with a sense of quiet accomplishment, though you know that tomorrow will bring more of the same. Yet within the monotony, there are moments of connection and humanity, brief glimpses of life beyond servitude. You think of the freedman at the market, the scribe with his ink-stained hands, and the laughter of children playing in the streets. These fragments of life, though small, are enough to keep you moving forward one step at a time. The evening brings a shift in atmosphere within the domus. While the sun sinks below the horizon and paints the sky in shades of amber and violet, the house begins its transformation. Lamps are lit, casting a warm glow over the marble floors and frescoed walls. You're tasked with preparing the triclinium, the dining room for the evening's convivium, a formal dinner hosted by your master. Convivium nights are both a spectacle and a challenge. For the Roman elite, such gatherings are an opportunity to display their wealth, culture, and influence. For slaves, it's an intricate dance of service and silence, a chance to shine through competence or stumble into punishment. Tonight, you're among the many working behind the scenes to ensure the event's success. The triclinium itself is a masterpiece of Roman design. Its 3 couches arranged around a low table laden with silverware and fine ceramics. The walls are adorned with frescoes depicting mythological scenes, their vibrant colors a testament to the household's affluence. You carefully place a garland of ivy around the table's edges, its green leaves adding a touch of nature to the otherwise opulent space. In the kitchen, the cook is orchestrating a culinary symphony. The air is thick with the aroma of roasted meats, honey-glazed dates, and a stew seasoned with exotic spices brought from distant lands. You marvel at the variety of ingredients, though you know the feast is a stark contrast to your own meals, simple, sustaining, and unremarkable. As guests arrive, the house fills with the hum of conversation and the clatter of sandals on stone. You stand discreetly near the entrance, ready to assist with cloaks and sandals. The guests range from senators and merchants to poets and philosophers, their tunics and togas reflecting their social standing. Their laughter and chatter fill the air, a cacophony of voices discussing politics, art, and the latest gossip. The convivium begins with an offering to the household gods, a small libation, poured into the larorium, the family shrine. This ritual, though brief, sets the tone for the evening, a reminder of Rome's deep connection to tradition and the divine. You watch from the shadows, your role one of silent observation. Service during the meal is a test of endurance and precision. You move between the couches with practiced grace, refilling goblets of wine and replacing empty platters with fresh dishes. Each action is deliberate, designed to go unnoticed. Yet the slightest misstep, a spilled drink, a delayed response could draw ire and swift reprimand. Amid the grandeur, the conversation shifts to topics that illuminate the world beyond the domus. A senator recounts a recent debate in the Curia, his words a glimpse into the machinations of Roman politics. Another guest, a merchant, speaks of his travels to Alexandria and the marvels he encountered in the bustling markets of the city. A poet recites verses inspired by the gods, his voice weaving a tapestry of myth and emotion. These snippets of conversation offer a window into lives far removed from your own. They remind you of the vastness of the Roman world, a sprawling empire held together by ambition, conquest, and culture. Yet as a slave, your place in this world is defined by its limits, boundaries that dictate your actions, thoughts, and aspirations. Historians still argue whether the convivium was a true celebration of culture or merely an ostentatious display of excess. To you, it's both a dazzling spectacle that highlights the privileges of the elite while underscoring the labor that sustains it. As the evening progresses, the mood grows livelier, fueled by wine and entertainment. A pair of musicians enters the room, their lyres and flutes filling the air with melodies. A slave girl performs a graceful dance, her movements mesmerizing yet tinged with an underlying sense of vulnerability. You can't help but feel a connection to her, a shared understanding of the unspoken pressures that come with servitude. The convivium concludes with a toast to the gods and the empire, the guests raising their goblets in unison. As they begin to depart, you assist with their cloaks and ensure their departure is smooth. The house gradually quiets, the echoes of laughter and music fading into the night. Your work, however, is not yet done. The aftermath of the convivium requires careful cleaning and restoration. You and the other slaves move through the triclinium, clearing away the remnants of the feast and scrubbing the floors to their original sheen. It's a painstaking process, one that extends into the early hours of the morning. As you finally retire to your sleeping quarters, the weight of the day settles upon you. The convivium, with all its splendor and challenges, is a microcosm of Roman society, a world of contrasts where beauty and labor coexist, each dependent on the other. Lying on your straw mat, you reflect on the evening's events. The flicker of a lamp in the distance casts shadows on the walls, their shifting shapes a reminder of life's transience. Despite the hardships, there's a quiet resilience within you, a determination to endure, to find moments of humanity within the constraints of servitude. And as sleep takes hold, you dream of the lyre's melody and the ivy garland, fleeting symbols of grace in a world of ceaseless toil. Morning comes quickly, the sunlight piercing through the narrow windows of the slaves' quarters and spilling onto the stone floor. Your body aches from the previous night's labor, but there's little time for rest. The house is already stirring, and the day's demands wait for no one. You rise slipping into your tunic and head toward the atrium. The cool morning air carries the faint scent of damp earth and flowers from the garden. The master of the house is pacing near the impluvium, his tunic neatly draped, and his sandals polished to a shine. His mood today seems brisk, but not unpleasant, a small mercy. Your tasks for the morning are routine yet varied. First comes the cleaning of the atrium, a central space that serves as both a functional and symbolic heart of the domus. You fetch a broom and bucket, sweeping away the dust and debris that has gathered overnight. The impluvium, with its shallow pool designed to collect rainwater, requires special attention. You polish its edges until they gleam, the reflection of the sky rippling in its surface. As you work, you overhear snippets of conversation from the tablinum, the master's study. He's meeting with a client, their voices low but insistent. The discussion seems to center on a land dispute, one of many issues that arise in the vast and complex world of Roman property ownership. You can't help but wonder about the sheer scale of their concerns, so distant from your own immediate reality. After the cleaning, you're sent to assist in the kitchen. The cook, a sharp-tongued but skilled woman, is already in the midst of preparing the day's meals. Today's menu is modest by Roman standards, consisting of bread, cheese, olives, and a stew made from lentils and vegetables. It's a far cry from the extravagance of the convivium, but still a step above the meager rations you're accustomed to. Your role in the kitchen is menial but crucial. You grind the grain for bread, the rhythmic motion of the millstone, a small meditation amidst the chaos. The scent of freshly baked loaves fills the air, mingling with the herbal aroma of the stew. It's a sensory reminder of the simple pleasures that persist even in a life of servitude. By midday, the household settles into a brief lull. The master has departed for the forum, where he'll spend the afternoon engaging in business and politics. The lady of the house, adorned in a stola of fine linen, presides over the servants with an air of quiet authority. She assigns tasks with precision, her eyes missing nothing. You're sent to the peristylium, the colonnaded garden at the back of the house. This serene space, with its manicured plants and gently bubbling fountain, is both a retreat and a symbol of Roman wealth. Your job is to prune the shrubs and sweep the pathways, ensuring the garden remains a tranquil oasis. As you work, you're struck by the garden's beauty, a beauty that feels almost ironic in its contrast to the lives of those who maintain it. Historians still argue whether these gardens were a genuine expression of Roman appreciation for nature, or merely another status symbol. To you, they're both. The afternoon brings a different set of challenges. A merchant arrives at the domus, his cart laden with goods from across the empire. You're tasked with helping to unload the wares, which include amphorae of olive oil, sacks of grain, and jars of garum, the pungent fish sauce beloved by Romans. The merchant chats amiably with the steward, his words peppered with tales of distant provinces and treacherous sea voyages. Unloading the goods is heavy, back-breaking work, but it's also an opportunity to glimpse the broader world. Each item tells a story: the olive oil from Hispania, the grain from Egypt, the spices from India. They're reminders of Rome's vast reach and the interconnectedness of its empire. As evening approaches, the pace of the household slows. You find a rare moment of respite sitting on the edge of the garden fountain and letting the cool water trickle over your fingers. It's in these fleeting moments that you feel most human, most connected to the world beyond your servitude. The day ends with a final round of cleaning and preparation for the night. The atrium is swept once more, the lamps are refilled with oil, and the household gods are given their evening offerings. The master and his family gather for a simple dinner, their voices soft and unhurried. When the family retires, you return to your quarters, your body heavy with exhaustion. The day has been long and demanding, yet it's also been filled with moments of quiet reflection and small victories. As you lie on your mat, the sounds of the house fade into the background, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves in the garden. Sleep comes quickly, carrying you into dreams of olive groves and distant shores. Despite the hardships, there's a sense of endurance within you, a reminder that even in the most constrained of lives, there's room for hope and humanity. The sound of footsteps stirs you awake before dawn, pulling you from dreams into the muted chill of reality. Today's work won't begin in the domus. Instead, you're sent to join a group of laborers heading out to one of the master's agricultural estates on the outskirts of the city. These trips, though, arduous, offer a rare change of scenery, a brief escape from the confining walls of the house. The journey to the Villa Rustica is long and quiet, with the cart rattling over cobbled roads and dusty paths. The landscape shifts from the bustling chaos of the city to the rolling countryside dotted with olive groves and vineyards. It's serene, almost peaceful, if you can forget the reason for your travel. The fields stretch wide and endless, the kind of expanse that can make you feel both free and insignificant all at once. Once you arrive, the overseer, a burly man with a sharp voice and an unforgiving gaze, assigns tasks with brisk efficiency. Your job today is harvesting olives, a process that's as repetitive as it is physically taxing. You work alongside a mix of slaves, freedmen, and hired laborers, all toiling under the same sun, but with vastly different fates. The olive trees are ancient and gnarled, their branches heavy with fruit. You climb a sturdy ladder and begin plucking the olives, dropping them into a woven basket slung over your shoulder. The work is rhythmic, almost hypnotic, the rustling leaves and soft plunks of falling fruit a steady soundtrack. Occasionally you overhear snippets of conversation gossip about the master murmurs of rebellion in distant provinces, tales of wild boars in the forest. Midway through the day, the overseer barks for a break, and you sink onto the dry grass with a sigh of relief. A fellow worker shares a small loaf of bread, and a handful of dried figs, a humble but welcome meal. You eat slowly, savoring each bite as though it were a feast. The sun climbs higher, scorching the earth and drawing beads of sweat from every brow. The air smells of crushed olives and dry soil, a scent that clings to your skin. You think about the final product, the golden oil that will grace the master's table, a luxury that seems worlds away from the labor it requires. Historians still argue whether agricultural estates like this one were more efficient under slave labor or free labor, with some pointing to the productivity of large latifundia as proof of the system's effectiveness. From your vantage point, however, the question seems almost absurd. Efficiency is little comfort when your hands are blistered, your back aching, and your freedom a distant dream. By late afternoon, the baskets are filled to the brim, and the overseer signals the end of the day's work. You help load the baskets onto carts, the weight of the olives a testament to the sheer effort of the day. As you secure the load, you notice the distant silhouette of the Villa Rustica, yes, its red-tiled roof glowing in the fading sunlight. It's a stark reminder of the social divide between those who own the land and those who labor on it. The journey back to the city is quieter than the morning ride fatigue settling over the group like a heavy blanket. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. For a moment, you allow yourself to appreciate the beauty of the scene, even as your muscles protest every jolt of the cart. When you finally return to the domus, it's well past dusk. The house is quiet, the family likely retired for the night. You slip into the kitchen to fetch a small meal, some leftover porridge and a piece of bread, before retreating to your quarters. As you lie on your mat, the events of the day replay in your mind. The countryside, the labor, the camaraderie of shared exhaustion. It all feels like a blur. Yet amidst the hardship, there's a strange sense of connection to the land and its rhythms. You wonder if the olive trees, with their deep roots and enduring presence, feel the same. Sleep comes slowly tonight, your body too tired to settle easily. But when it does, it's deep and dreamless, a welcome escape from the unrelenting demands of life. The sound of the master's voice jolts you from your slumber, a sharp reminder of the unpredictability that defines your life. This morning you've been summoned to assist with a special task, a dinner gathering for prominent guests. The household is abuzz with activity, each slave moving with purpose, driven by the unspoken fear of the consequences for failure. Your role today involves preparation in the kitchen, a place where chaos and precision coexist in a delicate balance. The kitchen is a hive of activity filled with the aromas of roasting meat, simmering sauces, and freshly baked bread. Fires crackle in brick ovens, pots clang against one another, and the head cook issues commands like a general marshalling an army. The menu is a testament to the master's wealth and social status. Exotic ingredients from across the empire, figs from Hispania, honey from Crete, and spices from the east are laid out on wooden tables. You're tasked with grinding herbs into a fine paste using a heavy stone mortar. The repetitive motion is tiring, but the fragrant mix of thyme, oregano, and coriander is oddly soothing. As the meal takes shape, you can't help but marvel at the sheer extravagance of Roman cuisine. There's a peacock, stuffed with dates and spices, a platter of fresh oysters, and a dish called garum, a pungent fish sauce that is both a delicacy and an acquired taste. Historians still argue whether garum was universally beloved or merely tolerated by those too polite to refuse it. From your position, the smell alone is enough to make you question its appeal. By mid-afternoon, the dining area or triclinium is transformed into a scene of opulence. Low couches arranged around polished tables are adorned with garlands of ivy and bowls of fresh fruit. Oil lamps cast a warm glow, their flickering light dancing on the walls. You're instructed to assist with the final touches, placing silver plates and fine glassware with meticulous care. When the guests arrive, the atmosphere shifts. The once hectic household becomes a symphony of well-rehearsed movements. Slaves pour wine into delicate goblets, refill platters with precision, and ensure that no guest waits too long for service. The guests draped in fine togas and adorned with gold jewelry lounge on the couches, laughing and gesturing animatedly. You catch snippets of their conversation, debates about politics, tales of military conquests, and boasts of their wealth. It's a stark reminder of the chasm between their lives and yours. Yet, amidst the laughter, there's an undercurrent of tension. The master, ever mindful of his social standing, watches the proceedings like a hawk, ensuring that every detail reflects his status. One guest, a senator with a booming voice and a taste for theatrics, commands the attention of the room. He recounts a story about a gladiatorial match he recently attended, describing the blood-soaked sand and the roar of the crowd in vivid detail. The guests cheer and raise their goblets, reveling in the spectacle. As the evening progresses, the wine flows freely and the conversations grow louder and more animated. You're instructed to remain near the edges of the room, ready to respond to any demand. A snapped finger, a pointed gesture, and you're moving swiftly to refill a cup or retrieve a forgotten item. The night stretches on and the air grows thick with the scent of spilled wine and the remnants of the feast. The guests begin to leave in twos and threes, their laughter echoing down the hallways. When the last of them departs, a collective sigh of relief ripples through the household. The cleanup begins immediately, a task as daunting as the preparation. You join the others in clearing the tables, scrubbing plates, and sweeping the floors. The once lavish triclinium is stripped of its decorations, reduced to its bare essentials. By the time you retreat to your quarters, the sky is tinged with the first light of dawn. Your body aches, your eyelids are heavy, and your stomach growls from a day spent surrounded by food you weren't allowed to taste. As you lie down, the memory of the evening lingers, a vivid tableau of indulgence and excess, a stark contrast to the simplicity of your own existence. You wonder how much of this life is performance, a carefully crafted illusion meant to impress and intimidate. And you wonder too about the guests, whether they see the labor that sustains their luxuries, or if to them you're as invisible as the oil lamps casting shadows on the walls. The morning sun filters through the narrow cracks in the wooden shutters of your small quarters, stirring you awake for yet another day under the Roman sun. Your body protests as you push yourself up from the hard palate muscles, still aching from yesterday's labor in the kitchen and the late-night cleanup. You trudge toward the bustling courtyard where your day's duties await each step heavier than the last. Today you're assigned to the garden, a rare shift from the claustrophobic kitchens and shadowed halls. The villa's garden is a sprawling patchwork of fragrant herbs, flowering vines, and orderly rows of vegetables. It's both a sanctuary and a trap, a place of momentary calm, but also a reminder of the endless work you must perform to sustain your master's lavish lifestyle. The garden smells of damp earth, crushed mint, and something sweet, perhaps the lingering scent of roses. You bend over hands, digging into the soil, pulling weeds that threaten to choke the prized plants. The sun warms your back, but the work is backbreaking and slow. You've learned to move with a rhythm, letting your mind wander to avoid the fatigue. Here in the midst of the greenery, you notice small, surprising details. A solitary snail making its slow pilgrimage across a leaf. A ladybug resting on a stalk of lavender. You wonder if the master ever notices these tiny moments, or if his eyes skim past, always searching for status symbols rather than simple beauty. Among the herbs, you spot an odd plant. You've heard the masters call silphium, a legendary herb prized in Roman cuisine and medicine, now sadly extinct. It was said to be so valuable that it could cost more than gold. You gently brush your fingers over the leaves, thinking about how something so precious could vanish from the world, much like the fleeting freedom you once dreamed of. Garden duties aren't just about plants. You're also charged with tending the small fountain that murmurs at the garden's center. Its cool trickling water is a rare source of comfort in the sweltering Roman heat. You fill clay pots with fresh water for the household, careful to avoid spilling a drop, knowing even the smallest waste could draw the master's ire. There's an odd tradition among some slaves working in the gardens, planting small tokens or messages hidden beneath the soil, a quiet form of resistance or hope. Some say it's superstition. Others say it's a whispered pact between those bound to the earth, but longing for something more. Historians still argue whether these gestures held real power, or were simply small acts of defiance against an unyielding system. As noon approaches, the courtyard fills with the clatter of dishes and the sound of the master's guests preparing for their midday meal. You hear laughter and chatter drift through the walls, mingling with the aroma of roasted meats and fresh bread. It's a stark contrast to your day's toil, reminding you again of the gulf between your world and theirs. Still, the garden offers a kind of solace, a reminder that life continues even under harsh circumstances. You take a brief moment to press your hands to the warm stone of the fountain, feeling the pulse of water beneath, imagining that it connects you somehow to the wider world beyond these walls. Before you return to the household, you pause by a small patch of wildflowers growing near the garden's edge. Their delicate petals seem almost out of place amidst the ordered rows of cultivated plants. You reach out and touch one softly, a tiny rebellion of beauty in a life often defined by hardship. As you walk back toward the villa, the sun now high in the sky, you brace yourself for the tasks ahead. The garden may offer brief respite, but your life is still woven tightly into the fabric of servitude. Each day brings its own challenges, its own quiet struggles, and its own small victories. You wonder how long this cycle will continue, how many more mornings you'll rise to tend plants you don't own, how many more days you'll labor to sustain lives that never notice yours. And yet, even in the midst of this, a faint hope lingers, a hope that someday, somehow your story might be remembered beyond the walls of the villa. You step into the dim kitchen where the aroma of herbs and smoke lingers in the air, mingling with the faint, ever-present scent of flour and stale bread. It's early and the kitchen buzzes with a quiet urgency, a hive of preparation before the day's main meal. Your hands move almost on autopilot, kneading dough with practiced efficiency, shaping loaves that will be devoured by the masters and their guests, leaving only crumbs for you and your fellow slaves. Bread is the staff of life, they say, and in the Roman world it truly is. But for you, the bread is both sustenance and a symbol of your place, always enough to fill your belly, but never quite enough to satisfy your hunger for freedom. The ovens are heated by wood fires, and the air thickens with heat and smoke, making your eyes water. You wipe your brow with a rough cloth, careful not to lose focus. The kitchen slaves, some born into servitude, others captured from far-flung provinces, work side by side in a rhythm both brutal and strangely harmonious. You share brief whispered jokes about the master's extravagant feasts and the strange combinations of foods that often find their way onto the table like peacock tongues or dormice stuffed with nuts. Yes, really. You scoop up a handful of dough and fold it over, imagining it might someday be a simple loaf of panis plebeius, the basic bread eaten by common folk, humble yet nourishing. In contrast, the master's table often boasts panis siligineus bread, made from fine wheat, a clear marker of status and wealth. As you work, you overhear talk among the other slaves about a recent shipment of grain that arrived from Egypt. It's a reminder that the Roman Empire's vast reach feeds this very kitchen, linking your life here to a web of conquest and trade that spans continents. The grain's quality fluctuates. Some years the harvests fail, forcing the kitchen to stretch meager resources even thinner. It's here amidst the flour dust and clattering pots that you hear the oddest rumor. Some slaves believe that if you burn a tiny bit of bread in the ashes, you can summon the spirits of the dead. Others insist that mixing a little honey with the dough brings good luck, or even wards off illness. These small beliefs keep the kitchen slaves saying their quiet magic amid the grind of daily toil. You notice an old slave quietly carving a tiny figure from a piece of stale bread crust. It's a small, delicate shape, maybe a bird or a simple godlike figure. Some say these bread carvings were a kind of prayer, a way to preserve a bit of humanity in a life defined by servitude and invisibility. Historians still argue whether these carvings were common or just isolated acts of desperation. The master's overseer bursts in barking orders in a harsh voice. The bread must be ready before the guests arrive. You take a deep breath and keep working, your hands moving swiftly, your mind partly elsewhere. You wonder if the masters ever pause to think about the hands that knead their bread, the backs that bear the weight of their comfort. Or if you're just part of the invisible machinery that keeps this grand household running. As the ovens glow red hot, you steal a quick moment to sneak a small piece of bread, the burnt crust too tough for the masters, but a precious morsel for you. You chew slowly, savoring the taste bitter and smoky, but its nourishment all the same. The kitchen hums with life and exhaustion, a place where survival is both an art and a necessity. And as you step away from the oven, the heat still warm on your face, you carry with you the simple knowledge that no matter how hard life gets, this bread, this most basic of foods, connects you to something bigger. To history, to resilience, and maybe, just maybe, to hope. You wake to the dawn's first light, the soft murmur of the city stirring outside your cramped quarters. The air smells faintly of smoke sweat, and the muddy Tiber flowing sluggishly through Rome's heart. This morning your feet carry you to the bustling slave market, an arena of quiet dread and desperate hope, where lives like yours are weighed and measured for worth. The market sprawls like a maze, a cacophony of voices, haggling over bodies rather than goods. You see men, women, and children displayed on wooden platforms, their faces veiled with a mixture of fear and resignation. Some try to hide injuries, others silently pray for a kind owner. You remind yourself survival here depends on appearing useful, docile, even a little eager. The market master, a portly man with a booming voice, paces before the crowd announcing the arrival of a fresh shipment of slaves. His words echo across the square as buyers scrutinize each individual with a cold, calculating gaze. The lowest price is your fate's ceiling, but sometimes there's a flicker of kindness from a potential master, a merciful pause before the inevitable sale. You overhear whispers among the onlookers about the peculium, a strange and little-known allowance of money or property some slaves might legally own. Peculium could be earned through exceptional service, and occasionally it allowed a slave to buy freedom. It sounds like a fairy tale, but a few rare cases prove it's possible. Yet most slaves remain chained to their owners, bound by law and circumstance. The infamous slave collar catches your eye metal heavy and engraved with the owner's name and address. It's a brutal label of possession, and warning escape means punishment, sometimes death. But not all slaves wear them. Household slaves often avoid the collar, trusted more for their skills and obedience. Historians still argue whether collars were widespread or limited to urban slaves and runaway offenders. As the market day drags on, you catch sight of a young girl barely 12 sold for a measly sum. Her eyes flash with defiance, an ember of spirit that refuses to be snuffed out. You remember tales of female slaves trained as wet nurses, seamstresses, or entertainers' roles that gave them some protection but also bound them tightly to their master's whims. Despite the bleakness, small acts of rebellion flourish. Slaves, exchanging secret notes, slipping hidden gifts, or sharing scraps of news from distant provinces. These moments stitch the fractured slave community together, weaving threads of hope in the fabric of captivity. You slip away from the market's chaos, clutching a few coins slipped from a sympathetic buyer, your peculium seedling. Maybe, just maybe, this tiny spark could grow into your escape plan. The slave market is a world where flesh is currency, but spirit remains a wild and untamable thing. You find yourself back in the household where the air is thick with the scent of cooking fires and dust stirred up by hurried footsteps. Here you join the ranks of domestic slaves, those who scrub, serve, and scurry to keep the Roman villa running like clockwork. The rhythm of your day is dictated by your master's whims and the unrelenting demands of survival. Your morning begins with fetching water from the well, the chill seeping into your bones as you carry the heavy clay jars back through the courtyard. Nearby, the cook barks orders, tossing herbs and scraps into a bubbling pot. The kitchen is a kingdom of smells and heat, and you tread carefully, avoiding burns and sharp knives, knowing well the price of a mistake. One of the more curious facts you learn here is the use of garum, the ubiquitous fermented fish sauce that flavors almost every Roman dish. It's pungent, salty, and at first it nearly overwhelms your senses, but the rich umami taste makes it addicting. Some say garum was so prized it was even used as medicine, although others whispered it could mask the taste of less than fresh food. Your master's cook swears by it, but you secretly wonder if the fishy aroma might explain why some slaves suffer from stomach troubles more often than their owners. You move to assist the laundry slaves who labor over large vats of water and lye soap to cleanse the master's togas and linens. Their hands are raw and cracked, a testament to the brutal physical toll of their work. Interestingly, you discover that some wealthy Romans hired specialized slaves trained in different household crafts: tailors, gardeners, even librarians. These skilled slaves had a strange blend of privilege and pressure. Their talents could elevate their status, but never free them. During a brief moment in the garden, you notice a small plot where the household grows herbs and vegetables. The knowledge of plants is another survival tool. Slaves often tend these patches, growing medicinal herbs like rue and sage, or bitter vegetables like endive. Some slaves, known as medici servi, even served as healers or midwives, a role both respected and feared. Rumor has it these healers practiced secret rituals and remedies outside official Roman medicine, blending superstition and science in ways historians still debate. Your tasks are endless, and the master's gaze sharpens with every misstep. The slightest error could bring harsh punishment, a lash, a knight chained in the stocks, or worse. Yet small kindnesses sometimes slip through the cracks. A master's daughter may toss you an extra piece of bread, or a whispered word of thanks. Tiny sparks of humanity in an otherwise cold world. By the evening, your muscles ache. Your skin smells of sweat and ash. But you cling to the small satisfactions, knowing you kept the household running, that you survived another day. In this world of servitude, every chore is a thread in the tapestry of life. Every task a step in the slow, grinding dance between oppression and endurance. The dawn greets you with the heavy scent of sweat and earth as you trudge out to the fields where the backbone of Rome's wealth quietly labors. Here the world feels vast and indifferent, with endless rows of grain swaying under the sun's relentless gaze. You are a field slave now, your hands calloused and cracked from clutching a plow, your back bent beneath the weight of work that never seems to cease. Your day begins before the sun crests the horizon. The air is crisp, yet carries the metallic tang of tools striking stone and soil. Unlike the relative shelter of the villa, the fields offer no reprieve. No cool kitchens or soft mats, only dirt, sweat, and the occasional sting of thorns. You learn quickly to endure. The overseer watches closely, cracking his whip, not just to urge the oxen, but to remind you that your body is not your own. Interestingly, many field slaves were chained during the harvest to prevent escape, their wrists linked by iron cuffs that clink rhythmically as they bend and rise. Yet some farms experimented with different tactics, using task-based quotas and minimal supervision to maximize output, a strategy historians still debate in terms of its effectiveness and cruelty. Your staple sustenance comes from what you can scavenge or cultivate: coarse barley bread, boiled legumes, and whatever root vegetables the farm yields. Some farmers allowed slaves small plots to tend, providing a meager supplement to their diet. You've heard whispers of slave gardens, tiny rebellions against hunger, where slaves nurtured herbs like dill or wild onions, turning survival into an act of quiet defiance. Fieldwork is not without its quirks. You might find yourself sharing the dirt with farm animals, and the manure's stench becomes an unpleasant but constant companion. A fringe fact is that some slaves served as shepherds, overseeing flocks that were both a food source and a form of wealth. Shepherd slaves, strangely enough, sometimes enjoyed a modicum of freedom, wandering far from their owners and acquiring knowledge of the land, which they could trade for small favors or protection. At midday, the sun beats down mercilessly and the thirst is brutal. Water is scarce, often muddy and barely drinkable, but you learn to savor every sip as if it were a fine wine. You chew on bitter wild herbs to stave off hunger pangs and clutch your empty stomach as the overseer's voice booms, pushing you faster, harder. Despite the grueling labor, there's a rhythm to the fields. The seasons dictate the toil, and you grow attuned to the cycle of sowing and reaping, the promise of rain, and the slow dance of survival. Sometimes in the golden light of dusk, you catch a glimpse of the distant city, its marble shining like a cruel dream you'll never touch. The life of a field slave is brutal and bare, but it's a world where endurance and quiet cunning become your greatest allies, and where every handful of grain harvested is a small victory against the odds. You wake to a chill that cuts deeper than the morning fog, the chill of stone walls pressing in the faint echo of footsteps on cobblestones, and the sharp scent of cold air trapped beneath a low, rough ceiling. This is the urban slave's world, far from the open fields you once knew. Here the city's narrow lanes pulse with life and danger, and your fate is tied to the whims of your master's household. Your existence is framed by routine, but a routine filled with a surprising variety of duties. One moment you scrub floors until your knuckles bleed, the next you're serving guests at a banquet, your hands trembling beneath the weight of silver platters. City slaves do everything from cook and clean to tutor and entertain, each role carved out by your master's wealth and eccentricities. The buzz of the urban markets drifts through open windows, mingling with the sharp aroma of fish and the faint smoke of street fires. Historians still argue whether urban slaves enjoyed marginally better conditions than rural ones, or if the close quarters simply bred a different kind of hardship. It's true that you might escape the backbreaking labor of plowing fields, but the threats here, harsh punishments, social invisibility, and relentless oversight, are no less severe. A curious fact is that many slaves in the city were skilled artisans, carpenters, metalworkers, and potters, whose talents were both exploited and occasionally prized. You could be the quiet hand shaping a marble bust one day, and the swift servant answering a master's impatient call the next. This patchwork of roles meant your day never truly slowed. Your identity was always split between function and survival. On rare evenings, you slip out with other slaves into hidden alleys where whispered stories and laughter emerge like flickering candles in the dark. These moments, though brief and risky, become lifelines, affirming your humanity amid the oppression. You might share tales of distant homelands, compare injuries inflicted by cruel masters, or dream aloud about freedom that seems as distant as the stars. One fringe tidbit reveals that some slaves worked as secret messengers or spies within the labyrinth of the city, tasked with overhearing political plots or smuggling messages. Their precarious position gave them a unique form of influence, yet one that could be snuffed out with a single misstep. Such intrigue adds a shadowy layer to the city's social fabric, though much remains speculative. Food in the city is a lesson in scarcity and improvisation. Your daily bread might be a thin, hard flatbread, supplemented by whatever scraps you can barter or pilfer dried fish olives, or the occasional boiled vegetable. The aroma of rich banquets reminds you daily of the gulf between slave and master, a gulf filled with both hunger and resentment. Punishments here are swift and public. The master's lash cuts not just flesh, but your dignity. The stocks or chains on the forum's steps serve as grim reminders of your place. Yet strangely, some urban slaves cultivated relationships with their masters' families, earning small tokens of favor, perhaps a few coins or a lighter workload. Whether this was genuine kindness or calculated manipulation remains a matter for historians' debate. Every corner of the city breathes stories of survival and resistance. Some slaves became trusted household stewards, managing keys and secrets, wielding a subtle power that came with proximity to wealth. Others ran away, melding into the teeming masses beyond the city gates, chasing a freedom as elusive as the dawn. Life as an urban slave is a complex weave of drudgery, fleeting reprieve, and quiet rebellion. It demands a constant negotiation between fear and hope, servitude, and identity as you move through shadows and light in Rome's restless heart. You step into the dawn with a weariness deeper than the night's chill. Today the world feels heavier with the weight of uncertainty that all slaves carried, but heavier still for those who serve the military machine of Rome. As a soldier's slave or servus castrensis, your days blend sweat, fear, and a relentless grind, unlike the slow monotony of farm or city life. Picture the sprawling Roman camps, rows of wooden barracks, the clatter of armor being donned, and the stern voices of centurions barking orders like thunder across a storm. You trudge alongside legionaries, your hands constantly occupied sharpening swords, mending armor, preparing rations, and sometimes even carrying messages through enemy lines. Your life, though technically bound to your master's household, is inseparable from the clangor of war. Historical records tell us that many military slaves were tasked with critical support roles, vital to Rome's war machine. They carried water and food, tended the wounded, and even acted as scribes or clerks, recording troop movements and supplies. You might also be pressed into combat duty in desperate moments, a fact that many modern readers find surprising, and historians still debate the frequency and conditions of such forced fighting. This dual identity, both servant and auxiliary soldier, creates a tension that shapes your daily existence. You live in constant proximity to violence, yet you are not a soldier in full right. Your life teeters on the edge of survival, caught between the brutal discipline of the camp and your position as a possession, not a comrade. One quirky tidbit that might surprise you is that some military slaves were actually quite well treated compared to other slaves. Their value to the legion was recognized, and they could sometimes earn their freedom through long service or acts of valor. Still, this was no guarantee. For every slave who gained freedom, countless others perished in battles or under the lash for minor transgressions. As you carry out your duties, the camp becomes a cacophony of noises and smells. The clang of metal striking metal, the acrid scent of burning wood and leather, and the ever-present smell of unwashed bodies packed into wooden bunks. You learn to navigate this sensory assault, tuning out pain and fatigue to function like a well-oiled cog in the massive Roman war machine. Historians still argue whether the presence of slaves in Roman armies contributed significantly to military effectiveness or was merely a pragmatic solution to logistical challenges. Some scholars believe that slaves and freedmen made up a surprisingly large portion of the logistical support system, while others see their role as more peripheral. In rare moments of quiet, you might reflect on your precarious existence. Freedom for a military slave could come suddenly, sometimes as a reward, sometimes as a grim necessity if a master was killed or fell in battle. Yet the ever-present danger and the brutal reality of camp discipline often overshadowed such hopes. Another fringe fact is that some military slaves developed close relationships with their masters, gaining unusual degrees of trust and autonomy. These bonds could blur the lines between slavery and loyalty, complicating the harsh social hierarchies of Roman military life. Were these relationships genuine or just another form of control? The evidence is as fragmented as the battered shields thrown on the ground after a battle. Food in the camp is basic, but sustaining hard biscuits, salted pork, and whatever vegetables can be scavenged or carried. Rations were often meager and strictly controlled with soldiers and slaves alike, sometimes forced to forage or barter with local populations. You've learned to survive on less, turning every crumb into precious fuel for the grueling day ahead. Punishments in the camp are harsh and swift, designed to enforce discipline. You might witness floggings for minor mistakes, or see a fellow slave shackled for perceived insubordination. Yet amid the brutality, camaraderie sometimes emerges among the slaves. Quiet gestures of solidarity, shared scraps of food, whispered stories of distant homes. Life as a soldier-slave is a daily tightrope walk between survival and despair, utility and disposability. You know that your existence is bound to the fortunes of Rome's endless wars, and your hope for freedom flickers like a candle struggling against the wind. And so you move through the smoke and noise, a shadow among soldiers, forever caught in a world that demands strength but offers little mercy. You wake again to the chill of dawn breaking over the sprawling Roman estate, but today your place is not in the camp or the battlefield. It's in the sprawling domus, the grand urban household of your master, where wealth and power converge amid marble columns and frescoed walls. Here you step into the role of a servus urbanae, a city slave, tasked with the complex, often invisible labor that keeps elite Roman life ticking smoothly. Your mornings begin early. You navigate the labyrinthine corridors of the domus, where the scent of freshly baked bread mingles with the faint aroma of expensive perfumes. The house is alive with activity. Bustling servants prepare the household for the day, while the paterfamilias, your master and his family, start their routines of business, leisure, and socializing. You might be assigned as a personal attendant, a cook, a tutor, or even a secretary, positions that require not just brawn, but brains and subtlety. The urban slave's work is less physically exhausting than a farm or military slave's, but no less demanding. Discretion is your currency. One wrong word or action could spell punishment or worse. Historians tell us that urban slaves were integral to the social and economic fabric of Roman cities. Some of you might have had specialized skills, sewing, weaving, bookkeeping, that set you apart, though you were still legally considered property. You could live in relative comfort within the household, sometimes sharing quarters with other slaves, or inhabiting small rooms tucked away near the kitchens. Here's a quirky detail. Some slaves in wealthy households were employed as nomenclators, human memory aids who whispered the names of acquaintances, friends, and potential clients into their master's ears during social gatherings. Imagine being the ultimate walking Rolodex, yet without the luxury of walking away once the party ends. It's a role that required a sharp mind and a good memory, but came with the constant reminder of your status as invisible yet indispensable. Another surprising fact: many urban slaves were able to earn tips or small sums of money from their masters or guests, allowing some degree of financial independence. This peculium could be saved towards eventual manumission freedom, but was always subject to the master's whims. You may have dreamed of trading your chains for coins, yet that dream remained tantalizingly out of reach. The social dynamic inside the domus was a complex web. You observe the family's interactions, their power struggles and affection, all the while knowing you are both part of and apart from this world. You witness banquets where wine flows and rhetoric dazzles, but behind the scenes you scrub floors and silence your own needs. Scholars still argue about the degree of autonomy urban slaves enjoyed. Some suggest they had enough freedom to move about and engage in small businesses or social networks, while others see their lives as strictly controlled with little room for personal agency. Here's a fringe tidbit. Archaeological evidence hints that some slaves in urban households might have practiced forms of resistance, not recorded in texts. Secret messages carved on walls, hidden spaces for illicit gatherings, or subtle sabotage of household goods. Was this quiet defiance widespread? The truth is lost in the shadows of history, but the possibility adds a layer of complexity to your life. Your days blur into nights filled with whispered commands, stolen moments of rest, and the ceaseless rhythm of service. The domus is a stage where you play many roles: caretaker, entertainer, confidant, invisible helper. The weight of your chains is lightened only by fleeting glimmers of hope, freedom. Through manumission, the promise of a new life as a freedman or freedwoman. But hope is fragile. The line between privilege and punishment is thin. A minor mistake, forgetting a name, spilling a cup of wine, can bring harsh repercussions. You learn to tread carefully, to anticipate needs before they are spoken, to vanish like a shadow when unwanted attention looms. You observe the lives of freed slaves too, who navigate a new social reality as citizens with rights but limited acceptance. Their stories are a mixture of triumph and struggle, a reminder that freedom is a journey, not a destination. Food here is more varied than on the farm or battlefield. Olives, fish, bread with honey, and sometimes exotic fruits brought from distant provinces. You share scraps, but your tastes are shaped by what your master allows, a constant reminder of your place. Punishments inside the domus tend to be psychological as much as physical. Slaves might face humiliation, isolation, or the loss of small privileges. Yet some masters showed favor, allowing slaves to act as intermediaries in business or family affairs. Life as an urban slave is a paradox, one of proximity and distance, power and powerlessness. You live amid opulence, yet remain chained to servitude, your existence woven tightly into the fabric of Roman urban life. As night falls, you lie awake in your cramped quarters, listening to the distant laughter and music drifting from the banquet halls, dreaming of freedom that flickers just beyond reach. You wake again in the small, often cramped quarters of the urban domus, but today the heavy weight of your reality presses even deeper. You are not just a slave. You are a gladiator in training. This is no ordinary servitude. It's a brutal and paradoxical existence where your value lies in your ability to entertain through bloodshed, yet your survival hinges on obedience and strength. You are a ludus slave, living between life and death, spectacle and servitude. The day begins long before dawn. The faint sounds of the city merchants setting up stalls, carts rumbling on cobblestones, are drowned out by the sharp cries from the training grounds, where you and your fellow gladiators push your bodies beyond natural limits. You trudge through the morning mist, the coarse leather of your training gear rubbing against your skin, and the taste of dust lingering faintly in your mouth. The ludus is a harsh microcosm of Roman society, a world where brutality and discipline coexist with moments of camaraderie and unexpected tenderness. Your trainers, often former gladiators themselves, are relentless. They teach you to wield the sword to anticipate your opponent's moves and to endure pain with stoic endurance. Each session is a test of your willpower and a reminder that failure could mean death, not just in the arena but in punishment. Historical records tell us that gladiators came from diverse backgrounds, criminals condemned to fight prisoners of war and slaves. Like you, sometimes volunteers seeking glory or freedom. Your fate, however, is tied firmly to the whims of your lanista, the manager of the gladiator school, who controls every aspect of your existence from your diet to your training schedule. One odd fact: some gladiators, despite their grim profession, became wildly popular celebrities. Fans admired their skill, their bravery, and even their distinctive armor styles. The graffiti on Pompeii's walls tells tales of favorite gladiators, much like modern sports fans cheering for their heroes. It's strange to think that people could admire you while you remain shackled to a life of violence. Another unexpected detail: gladiators, the slaves, were often well cared for. Their training regimen required them to maintain peak physical condition, which meant regular meals rich in carbohydrates, mostly barley and beans, earning them the nickname barley men in ancient texts. This diet was simple but effective, aimed at building endurance and muscle. Your day's routine includes moments of rest and recuperation during which you bond with fellow gladiators. There is a strange brotherhood among you, born of shared suffering and a common enemy, your masters. You exchange stories, dreams of freedom and superstitions that sometimes verge on the mystical. Some gladiators believed wearing certain amulets or performing rituals before battle could sway the favor of the gods, or at least the crowd. The scholarly debate around gladiators often focuses on their actual level of autonomy and agency. Were they merely tools of entertainment, or did some wield influence behind the scenes? Did gladiators have opportunities to buy their freedom, or was that just an idealized hope? The answers remain elusive, shrouded in a mixture of historical fact and popular myth. You also become aware of the complexity of Roman entertainment culture. The games were more than just bloody spectacles. They were political tools used by emperors and elites to curry favor with the populace, distract from social problems, and demonstrate the might of Rome. The roar of the crowd in the amphitheater is a constant reminder of your role in this grand theater. Punishments for failure or disobedience in the ludus were swift and severe. Some trainers used whips, others relegated underperforming gladiators to menial, humiliating tasks. The threat of death was always present, whether in training or the arena itself. But death in the arena was not always immediate. Some gladiators were spared by the crowd or the editor's thumb raised or lowered, deciding your fate. There's a fascinating fringe theory that some gladiators developed secret codes and hand signals to communicate covertly during fights, altering strategies, or signaling surrender without the crowd or masters noticing. If true, it's a testament to their intelligence and survival instinct beneath the spectacle. Outside the arena, your life is rigidly controlled. You live in the barracks of the ludus, a stark place where camaraderie and tension simmer. The communal meals, the shared bunks, the endless training, it all serves to erase individuality, forging you into a weapon of the state and entertainment industry. Despite this, there are moments of unexpected humanity. Some masters formed personal bonds with their favored gladiators, protecting them or advocating for their manumission. Others were brutal taskmasters, viewing you as expendable. Your survival is often a matter of luck, skill, and the favor of those in power. Your nights are restless. You wrestle with fear, hope, and the physical ache of your body. You imagine freedom, though it seems like a distant dream. Some gladiators did achieve manumission, receiving the rudis, a wooden sword symbolizing their freedom, but the path was narrow and perilous. You recall stories of gladiators who turned into folk heroes, men like Spartacus, who led a massive slave uprising, challenging the very foundations of Roman power. Though ultimately crushed, these revolts echo in your mind, symbols of resistance in a world that seeks to keep you silent. As you close your eyes, the distant cheers of the Colosseum echo through the night, a haunting lullaby of power, pain, and fleeting glory. The dawn seeps in pale through the small barred window of your quarters, nudging you awake once again, the same cold stone walls reflecting a world where your days blur into endless cycles of labor, fear, and the faintest glimmers of hope. Today, however, the world beyond your prison stirs with a different rhythm. The city's pulse quickens as preparations for a major festival begin, and you, a Roman slave, find yourself at the heart of an intricate system that sustains not only the elite's extravagance, but also the very fabric of Roman society. You trudge through the morning fog, the chill biting at your skin, through the thin layers of rough fabric that mark your status. The air is thick with the scents of wood smoke, baking bread, and the unmistakable tang of the Tiber River flowing nearby, a reminder of the city's constant vitality, indifferent to your plight. Your journey takes you through narrow alleys and bustling forums, the sounds of merchants hawking their wares, mixing with the chatter of patricians and plebeians alike. It's a world of stark contrasts, opulence shadowed by poverty, freedom overshadowed by bondage. You are part of the vast undercurrent of slaves who toil behind the scenes during these festivals. While the noble citizens adorn themselves in togas and prepare lavish feasts, you carry out the unseen essential tasks that make such celebrations possible. You haul heavy amphorae filled with wine, lay out tables groaning under the weight of olives, bread, and roasted meats, and ensure the arenas and theaters are ready to welcome the throngs of spectators. Your hands calloused and stained know the rhythms of preparation intimately. Historical fact festivals in Rome, such as Saturnalia or the Ludi Romani, were massive affairs that could last days or even weeks, filled with religious rites, theatrical performances, chariot races, and gladiatorial games. Slaves like you were indispensable in organizing these events, though their contributions were rarely acknowledged in public. One quirky detail during Saturnalia rolls briefly reversed masters and slaves would exchange places in a symbolic gesture of social upheaval. You might be given a chance to wear your master's toga, or be served by those who usually ordered you about. It was a wild, chaotic festivity where normal rules loosened, even if only for a day or two. The juxtaposition was strange, a brief taste of freedom that was quickly snatched away once the festival ended. Another surprising tidbit is that some slaves specialized in festival-related skills, as musicians, actors, or even beast handlers for the spectacles in the arena. You might find yourself donning a mask to perform in a play, or managing exotic animals like lions and elephants, creatures that fascinated and terrified the Roman populace. Your life could vary dramatically depending on your master's interests and the skills you possessed, but beneath the surface, the reality of your existence remained harsh. The bright colors of the festival and the laughter of the crowd could not drown out the constant fear of punishment. Slaves who misbehaved or failed their tasks faced harsh penalties, whipping, chains, or worse. And even during festivals, the spectacle of human suffering continued. Gladiators fought, criminals were executed, and the crowd's bloodlust was satiated amid the revelry. Scholars still argue whether these festivals served more to unite Roman society or to mask its deep inequalities. Was Saturnalia a genuine moment of social leveling, or merely a safety valve that prevented larger unrest? Did the temporary inversion of social roles give slaves any lasting empowerment? Or was it a cruel joke played by the ruling class? The answer remains elusive, but as a slave you felt the contradiction sharply. You recall the murmurs among slaves about the legend of the Saturnalia king, a chosen figure who ruled over the festivities with humorous authority, issuing mock commands that the masters were supposed to obey. This figure was often a clever slave or freedman, and for a brief shining moment they wielded power. These stories were whispered eagerly, a small rebellion through laughter. Your tasks today take you to the grand amphitheater, where the stage is set for a series of games that will draw thousands. You help arrange the seating, prepare the cages for wild beasts, and polish the weapons of the gladiators. The smell of sand mixed with sweat and anticipation fills the air, a potent reminder of the violence soon to come. You wonder if any gladiators you know will fight today, their fates decided by crowd cheers or jeers. Interestingly, some slaves were involved in the logistics of these deadly games, not just as laborers, but as informants or even trainers, subtly influencing the outcome. The relationships between masters, gladiators, and slaves were complex and often fraught with tension. You see the patrons arriving dressed in their finest, their faces painted with the smiles of privilege. You serve them quietly, invisibly, as the center of attention is directed toward the spectacle. The crowd's roar when a favored gladiator wins reminds you that for all the cruelty, skill and courage could carve out a measure of respect and perhaps a shot at freedom. Amidst this, a scholarly debate lingers. To what extent did slaves' involvement in public spectacles contribute to their social mobility? Some historians argue that participation in such events allowed talented slaves or freedmen to gain status, wealth, or even manumission. Others insist the system was designed to keep them perpetually subjugated, using spectacle as a tool of control rather than empowerment. As dusk falls and the festival winds down, you return to your quarters, physically exhausted but mentally alert. The distant sounds of celebration fade into the night, leaving you alone with your thoughts. You reflect on the strange duality of your life, part of a grand cultural pageant, yet utterly invisible and expendable. Before sleep claims you, you consider the fleeting nature of these festivities. To the Romans, they were a necessary release, a way to honor gods, assert power, and maintain social order. To you, they were a bittersweet reminder of your bondage, a cycle of labor and suffering, punctuated by moments of fleeting, fragile hope. As your eyelids close, you imagine the dawn of a different kind of day one, where your story might shift from servitude to freedom, from invisibility to recognition. Until then, the festival's echoes linger, a testament to the complexity of Roman life and the resilience of those who lived it from the shadows. The morning sun filters weakly through the grime-streaked window of your cramped quarters, casting long shadows across the rough stone floor. You wake slowly, muscles aching the persistent chill. A reminder that comfort is a luxury few slaves enjoy. Today is no ordinary day. It is the beginning of a new chapter in your existence, one shaped by the subtle, shifting tides of Roman society, and the unlikely paths that slaves like you might carve toward freedom. But how real is that hope you're about to find out? You rise and dress in the threadbare tunic your master has provided, the fabric coarse against your skin. You think back to the countless mornings like this one, marked by the same routine of labor and obedience. But today there's talk in the household of manumission, the granting of freedom to some favored slaves. The possibility sets your heart racing, tempered by the knowledge that this is rare and fraught with conditions. Manumission, the formal process by which a slave was freed in ancient Rome, could happen in several ways. Sometimes a master granted it as a reward for loyalty or exceptional service. Other times, a slave could save money peculium to buy their own freedom, though this was often a slow and uncertain path. Then there was the legal ceremony where the freed slave became a libertus, gaining limited citizenship rights but remaining tied socially to their former master. Historical fact. By the late Republic and into the Empire, manumission became more common, with estimates suggesting that a significant percentage of the Roman population were freedmen and women. This shift altered the social fabric, blurring lines between slavery and citizenship, but never erasing the stigma of former bondage. You hear your master's voice calling you to attend the morning's tasks, but your mind drifts to the whispered stories circulating among slaves about what freedom really meant. Did freedmen truly enjoy liberty, or were they still trapped in new forms of dependence and discrimination? You remember the old saying, "Once a slave, always a slave in the eyes of society." One curious detail: freed slaves often took their former master's family name, a practice that created tangled social networks. You might find yourself sharing a name with your ex-master's children, bound forever by patronage and obligation. Some freedmen rose to wealth and influence, even entering politics. Others remained laborers, barely better off than before. Another odd tidbit is the role freedmen played in Roman religion. Many became collegia members, religious brotherhoods that provided mutual support and helped maintain social order. They often sponsored public buildings, games, and feasts to earn prestige and solidify their place in the community. This blend of newfound freedom and lingering servitude created a unique identity, neither fully citizen nor slave. Scholars still argue whether manumission was truly liberating or merely a strategic tool for masters to control and exploit former slaves under a different guise. Did freedmen gain genuine autonomy, or were they perpetually caught in a web of economic and social dependence? The debate continues, reflecting the complexities you live daily. As the day unfolds, you find yourself tasked with more delicate work, assisting your master's family in preparing for an upcoming ceremony. You serve wine, arrange flowers, and move quietly through the elegant villa, aware of every glance and whispered conversation. Your status is visible in the way people treat you, neither fully present nor entirely absent. You recall stories of freedmen who became wealthy merchants or artisans, leveraging their skills and connections to climb the social ladder. Their successes were celebrated, but also met with suspicion and disdain by the old aristocracy. You wonder if you could ever reach such heights, or if your chains, though invisible, now remain firmly fastened. One peculiar fact: some freedmen even sponsored gladiatorial games or built public baths, acts that won them public favor and blurred the lines between ex-slave and elite. Yet this public generosity was often driven by a desire to prove loyalty and secure protection, a reminder that freedom came with its own burdens. Your duties take you to the city's bustling market, where freedmen and slaves intermingle with citizens. The noise, smells, and chaos are overwhelming, but strangely invigorating a world alive with possibility and danger. You overhear rumors of political intrigue, of slaves plotting escapes, and of masters tightening their grip in response. Amid this swirl of activity, you meet a fellow slave who speaks of a secret society that aids runaways and helps slaves negotiate manumission. Their existence is whispered about in hushed tones, an underground network challenging the status quo. You listen, fascinated but wary. Trust is a scarce commodity. Historians still debate how widespread and effective such networks were. Were they organized resistance movements or isolated acts of defiance? The truth likely lies somewhere in between, but for you, the idea sparks a flicker of hope and fear. As evening falls, you return to the villa, exhausted but contemplative. The world you inhabit is one of contrasts, hope and despair, bondage and freedom, visibility and invisibility. Your journey reflects the broader story of Rome itself, a civilization built on the backs of countless enslaved people, yet shaped by their resilience and complexity. You lie down on your hard bed, muscles aching but mind restless. Outside, the city hums with life and possibility, while inside your dreams are a tangled weave of past suffering and future promise. The night air cools your skin, and you close your eyes, carried away by the gentle rhythm of breathing, and the fading sounds of a world that is both cruel and strangely beautiful. You awake once more to the steady cadence of Roman life, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, mingling with the distant murmur of voices in the forum. This morning feels heavier than most, not just because of the physical toll of your daily tasks, but because you sense a turning point is near. After years of servitude, countless moments spent in the shadows of others' lives, you're about to glimpse the full arc of what it truly meant to be a Roman slave. The struggles, the fleeting freedoms, the hopes deferred, and the legacy left behind. In this final stretch of your story, you remember the delicate balance slaves like you had to maintain every day between survival and resistance, between submission and assertion, between invisibility and the desperate craving for recognition. Your body bears the marks of labor, your spirit the marks of endurance. But beneath it all, there is a stubborn thread of humanity that neither chains nor cruelty can sever. The day begins with chores that take you beyond the villa's walls to the bustling city streets, where slaves, freedmen, and citizens collide in a chaotic dance of commerce and culture. You move through this crowd, a ghost in plain sight, unnoticed yet deeply observant. You notice the small gestures, how a master's son spares a rare smile for a favored slave, how a freedwoman haggles fiercely over the price of wool, how children born into servitude dream of a different life. One mainstream historical fact anchors this experience. By the height of the Roman Empire, slaves constituted roughly 25 to 40% of the population in Italy, a staggering figure that underscores just how central slavery was to everyday life. Yet their roles varied dramatically, from brutal laborers in mines to skilled craftsmen, from educated tutors to entertainers. The social fabric of Rome was woven with threads of bondage, freedom, and everything in between. You think about the peculiar roles slaves played in Roman religion and superstition. Some were believed to possess unique spiritual qualities, acting as mediums between the living and the dead, or serving as guardians of sacred rites. Others were the subject of bizarre rituals, like the peculiar practice of curse tablets, where slaves were sometimes blamed or invoked to cast spells. You recall overhearing the house priest mutter strange incantations, an eerie reminder of how slaves were entwined in the spiritual as well as physical machinery of Rome. Another quirky fact: Roman slaves were often named based on their origin or perceived characteristics. You might have been called Felix, meaning lucky ironically, or Burrus, meaning rough, or simply given a number. Names were tools of control and identity erasure, yet also for some marks of individual personality slipping through the cracks of oppression. Historians still debate whether slavery in Rome was more about economic necessity or social control. Some argue it was a brutal system designed purely for exploitation, while others highlight the complex social dynamics, including the potential for manumission social mobility of freedmen and the integration of slaves into Roman households. The truth, like your own experience, is layered and contradictory. As you navigate the crowded streets, you are reminded of the underground economy that thrived within the slave community. Bartering services, exchanging information, and sometimes plotting escape routes, slaves created their own networks that defied official oversight. You hear whispers of fugitives making it to free territories of secret meetings held in basements and back alleys. It's a risky game, but for many, the chance at freedom, however slim, is worth the danger. One fascinating detail: some slaves became indispensable to their masters, especially those with specialized skills like medicine teaching or craftsmanship. These favored individuals sometimes enjoyed better living conditions, opportunities to save money, and even the ability to influence decisions. You recall the skilled Greek tutor in the villa whose sarcastic wit made him both feared and adored. The relationship between masters and slaves was never straightforward. You recall moments of kindness shadowed by cruelty, loyalty rewarded with suspicion. You know of cases where slaves acted as trusted advisors or even lovers, blurring lines and complicating power dynamics. At the same time, punishment was never far away: whippings, chains, or worse, to remind you of your place. Another fringe tidbit involves the role of slaves in the imperial household. The emperor's slaves held extraordinary power behind the scenes, sometimes acting as gatekeepers or influencers. They lived in luxury unknown to most slaves, yet remained bound by absolute loyalty. Their stories are a stark contrast to the grim reality faced by the majority. Today, your tasks bring you face to face with an aging freedman who speaks to you quietly about the fragility of freedom. He warns that while manumission can grant legal status, the social scars remain. Freedmen often face discrimination, limited rights, and expectations to serve their former masters indefinitely. You ponder his words and wonder what the future might hold for you. The sun begins to set, casting a golden glow over the city's rooftops. You pause by the forum, watching senators debate laws that shape the lives of millions, including yours. The very foundations of Roman society are built in the backs of slaves, yet these voices rarely speak of you directly. Instead, your existence is a constant shadow, necessary but ignored. You think about the ultimate irony: Rome, a civilization of laws, architecture, and culture, rested on a system that denied basic humanity to so many. Yet in this contradiction lies the story of survival and adaptation. Slaves like you found ways to preserve dignity, forge communities, and influence the world around them, even when chained. As darkness deepens, you return to your small room, the familiar smell of damp stone and wood filling your senses. You lie down the hard mattress, a reminder of the distance between comfort and reality. Your thoughts drift to what lies beyond this life, whether in dreams, in the memories of those who knew you, or in the slow, grinding march of history itself. In this final moment, you realize that being a Roman slave was more than endless toil or suffering. It was a complex human experience, filled with resilience, cunning, hope, and heartbreak. Your story is not unique, yet it is vital, a testament to the countless voices that history often overlooks. And as your breathing slows and your eyes close, you carry with you the knowledge that even in bondage the spirit can soar.